Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. In the Congress, the debate begins about the request by the President of the United States for authorization to use military force against the Assad regime. Not Syria, the Assad regime, which is a small part of the larger canvas of the Syrian civil war, 30 months old. Michael Auslin of the American Enterprise Institute joins because while Congress is debating Syria, Michael is looking at what does Syria have to do with the pivot to Asia? Remember, the pivot to Asia was the second-term Obama administration major policy effort to look to China and its trading partners, and indeed the whole of the Pacific Rim, as a fresh start for the world economy and for looking for peace in the region, a peace that could be guaranteed by prosperity. Michael, a very good evening to you. I do not mention North Korea because that's a rogue state, and I'm trying to speak generally of the region. Syria right now, in the debate in the United States Congress, can you generalize how Asia looks upon this and figures what the United States could be up to? Good evening to you, Michael.
Good evening, John. Well, I think it is seen clearly as, if not a litmus test, as a very, almost a turning point to judge President Obama, first of all, and what he is going to be able to accomplish in his second term on the world stage. And I think more broadly, it encapsulates or crystallizes, maybe is a better word, a lot of the fears that our Asian allies and friends have as to where this country is going and the road to what some see as decline, what some see as just general retrenchment, and others feel is an appropriate cutting down of American stature in the world.
Beijing will take advantage of this, and well, they might. How do you imagine that conversation going? With Beijing struggling right now with the Bo Xilai matter and with the corruption investigations.
Well, I think that for them it is, as it is for Russia, it's a gift. It allows them to poke us in the eye, to frustrate and confuse the debate in America more. You know, you've got Russia maybe sending over its own parliamentary delegation to talk Congress out of authorization for military strikes. China and Russia have both already frustrated attempts at the UN to have some type of clear and firm statement on this. For the Chinese, I think there is the short-term effect of what they can try to do to complicate things for Obama and the Americans, and then there's the longer-term issue of taking advantage of it, whether they do it overtly or they do it more quietly behind the scenes, talking about a confused superpower, talking about a president who seems to be rehearsing for Hamlet more than he is leading the free world, and a country that itself doesn't know how to make a clear decision on what it wants to do when you start throwing in Congress and everyone else. I think, John, what is most concerning in terms of the pivot that we talk about is that it shows that when a great power starts talking about different parts of the world that it's going to focus on, then it automatically starts acting like a regional power. You know, if you want to be a great power, you have to be able to have the whole purview of the world in your scope and to be able to act. And by talking about the pivot, I think that the Obama administration diminished the American role in the world. Certainly that's what a lot of our allies were worried about. Are you turning away from us? But then reality caught up, and reality said, no, you still have responsibilities and threats and concerns in other parts of the world, but you're making it harder and harder, if not impossible, for yourself to play that global role you had before. That, to me, is what is worrisome.
I want to focus just on Tokyo, because over these last months, there's been much discussion about Tokyo and could it count on the United States in a confrontation with China over the fantastic but genuine conflict over the uninhabited Senkaku Islands. The new government in Tokyo has shown itself willing to step up and be much more militant and much more aggressive. However, this bombing in Syria, that's got to confuse the Tokyo government as to whether the United States can be counted upon, would be one interpretation. Do you believe it strengthens Beijing, believing that the U.S. is distracted now for at least 60 days, maybe 90 days, in bombing Syria and will have no time for backing up the Japanese?
Well, I think more than the time frame, John, what I would consider the biggest impact on the Senkaku situation and Sino-Japanese relations and our role is the longer-term corrosive effect on a vacillating president, a president and an administration that says one thing and then at the last second turns around, does an about-face, a president that feels only when he has the necessity politically will he go to Congress. It's a very divided, a very muddied, obviously a very muddied situation, but more than that, there's no articulation of what American interests are and American strategy. And if I'm Tokyo, I'm probably a little bit more concerned that the clarity that you have tried to push the Americans toward, going beyond just saying that, yes, the islands are covered under the treaty, but that's a very abstract concept, but to much more concrete statements about the balance of power in Asia, about the concerns the Americans have over Chinese assertion and aggression, which America has really never talked about under this administration, quite frankly not under the Bush administration all that much. That is what you would fear is even more at risk because of what Syria represents. This, what some have, even on the left, have quite frankly argued is an American turning away from the world, an America turning away from its traditional global responsibilities, regardless of how controversial those were. It's this sense of absolutely being adrift that I think is going to spill over into our other relations and make allies not only in Asia but in other parts of the world very concerned about the decision-making process in America, whether you can count on America, and what this means long-term.
Now the linkage of the rogue states, Syria, Iran, Pakistan, North Korea, China. We can link all of them for R&D, for proliferation, ballistic missiles, and nuclear weapons. Attacking one of them is attacking all of them. I don't hear that from Congress, Michael. I hear this as if we're going after a banana republic that's misbehaved in its most recent revolution. No understanding of the comprehensive threat we're facing.
Sure. Look, if you're any one of those rogue regimes, you probably think it's Christmas in September. I mean, it's the greatest gift they can receive, which is again an American president publicly, vocally drawing red lines and then backing away from them as quickly as he can. And not only that, this entire report that's come out about this literally last-minute conversion to go to Congress based on a one-on-one walk through the White House grounds with his chief of staff. Which even his senior national security advisors did not know about.
There's got to be more to that, don't you think, Michael? There has to be a phone call, some other explanation. Otherwise, it's like Saul on the road to Damascus here for the conversion of this. It's too fantastic right now. It
really is. You have to think that you're right, that there's something else behind it, or it is, I would argue, a very worrisome turn of events. That level of instability at the very top of the decision-making process, and Syria is not that hard a case. It is really not that.
No,
hard
but there were no graybeards. There were no wise counselors. Right. There was no gathering of the leadership to hash it over before the president's decision. There was just, as we're told, 7 o'clock. I changed my mind.
Yeah, it would really be fascinating to go back and see if there is any other case that we know of that's been reported at this level of something like that happening. And I certainly don't know of it offhand. Maybe your listeners who are very well informed can probably come up with
one more detail about Beijing, because Xi Jinping is sizing up the Obama administration for the next years. What did he learn from this? Just if there was one thing that Xi Jinping is told by his American advisors, what is it?
Oh, I think it's make the costs seem high. Even if they're not high, make them seem high, and this president at least will blink. And the other thing I think he learned from is you can now press ahead with that vaunted axis of evil that sort of is coming back into vogue, that you can reach out to Russia, and there is a lot of chance that there's going to be the ability of really working together to frustrate American plans.
Michael Auslin, writing most recently in the Wall Street Journal. He writes for WSJ.com as well. He's at the American Enterprise Institute, and his Twitter address, if you want to address your thoughts on Twitter, if you know how to do that, is at Michael Auslin. It's all very simple and straightforward. It's meant to be. Mine is at Bachelor Show. We're happy to hear from you. The pivot to Asia, that was then. This is John Batchelor.